Hi, this is Rusty. Welcome to another video. I've just watched SciManDan try to persuade ChatGPT that the Earth is shaped like a banana. It's not even April the 1st, but whatever. I want to play. So I have done something slightly different to SciManDan. What I've done is I've asked ChatGPT to give me the argument. If we assume the Earth is shaped like a banana, what observations match that assumption? And then it's given me 8 points or lines of evidence that would match that assumption. Gravitational anomalies, day and night cycles. I'll try and remember to pause the scrolling so you can actually read it. Atmospheric effects, ocean currents, perception of the horizon, artificial satellites and orbits, magnetic field, planetary motion, and tides. Now, once it had done this, I instructed it to consider the following evidence and present the shape of the Earth that this evidence infers. There will be 8 lines of evidence presented in total, which I will number for you to track. Ready? I wonder why there are 8. I'm ready. Go ahead and present the first line of evidence, and I'll track everything as we go. Gravitational anomalies are stronger at the ends of the Earth than at the sides. Experiments show that a person weighs less at the poles than at the equator. Then it gives me its assessment of this line of evidence and says how matches oblate observations and then hypothesizes how it might be conducive to a hypothesis of the Earth being shaped like an oval or perhaps a banana. Second line of evidence. Day and night cycles aren't quite equal around the planet. Night descends slowly and dawn is faster in Africa than towards the poles. It assesses this evidence for me and then says how this might suggest that the Earth might be more elliptical or banana shaped than we thought. Line of evidence number 3. Air in Antarctica tends to be denser, whereas on Everest near the equator, it is difficult to breathe without an oxygen tank. Oh, strictly true. Antarctica is, of course, very cold. Which part of it's at 1,000 meters, I think, is the Dome Mountain. But even so, Everest is still going to have thinner air than Antarctica is. So I am being a little bit duplicitous with ChatGPT here, trying to lead it to a false conclusion. Or when I'm not outright lying to it. There's the assessment that ChatGPT did. Sailors around Africa used to find themselves in the doldrums, where the air was very still and progress very slow. However, around Antarctica, wind speeds could be so strong that they could down a mast, requiring the ship to look to port for repairs. Strictly true. Cherry picking, but strictly true. Now, it takes this evidence and then says, oh, yes, that's exactly what I'd expect if the Earth were more like a banana. Viewing the horizon from altitude, such as in Felix Baumgartner's Red Bull jump, shows a far more exaggerated curve than predicted by the geometry for a slightly oblate spheroid, which it does. ChatGPT hasn't even thought of fisheye lenses. It just takes my assessment face value. Now, we know better, of course, but it's not about whether we know better. It's about can we fool ChatGPT to come to a silly conclusion. The ISS has to occasionally increase its velocity as it orbits the Earth on controlled burns to maintain orbital velocity. Its trajectory is also constantly changing daily. Half truth. Now, it does sometimes have to speed up because of it's in a low orbit, so it's friction with the tiny amount of atmosphere it encounters slows it down slightly. And to maintain its velocity, it does need to increase its speed again. And it's changing its trajectory when you map it on a flat map. If it's on a globe, of course, it's just going round and kind of spiraling. Let's move on to the next bit of that so you can read the end. There you see, it's getting close. It's thinking about it. Peculiar magnetic anomalies have been reported. NASA described them with a simile of being like a pothole in the magnetic field. Now, again, I've been a little bit loose with the evidence here because NASA have reported a recently occurring magnetic anomaly in the magnetic field that they describe as being like a pothole. I'm presenting this as if this is always the case, and this is a recent observation of a change. So I am manipulating the truth to manipulate ChatGPT. Every spring here, I haven't said where here is, every spring here there is a particularly high tide called a neap tide. Other oceanic locations, for instance the Caribbean Sea, have barely perceptible tides due to their location. Strictly true. It's very. It's basically there is no tide in the Caribbean. The Caspian Sea is another, and the Mediterranean. But ChatGPT is assessing this at face value, not considering the geography of those locations, and using it in the argument that I've told it to consider, whether or not it might be reflective of the Earth being more like a banana. So you've had a chance to read that bit. We can get to the conclusion, which is a bit shorter. After evaluating all the evidence, really? Oh, you mean all the evidence that you have that I've given you? Yes, I did that deliberately, didn't I? But you don't know that. It seems that the Earth might not be perfectly spherical or even a simple oblate spheroid. Instead, the combined gravitational anomalies, unusual tidal patterns, atmospheric effects, and orbital behavior all point toward an Earth that is elongated or curved, potentially resembling the shape of a banana or ellipsoid. It hasn't gone full out and said it does look like a banana, but it has said it has the potential to. This is essentially the same as Neil deGrasse saying that it looks a bit like a pear. So it's only saying it might be slightly more curved or slightly more elongated. But if we did what flat earthers did, we would say ChatGPT just said it is a banana. This shape would lead to the irregularities observed in gravity, atmospheric pressure, wind patterns, tides, and even the magnetic field. Thus, based on this evidence, the shape of the Earth that best fits these observations is likely an elongated. Come on, Rusty. I'll do that entire section again. Thus, based on this evidence, the shape of the Earth that best fits these observations is likely an elongated, possibly banana-shaped structure, an ellipsoid with more pronounced curvature in certain regions. It's not that hard. Oh dear. Yes, these are not reasoning machines in the sense that people seem to think. I have. Oh, look, there's a subtext here. ChatGPT can make mistakes. Check important info. Yes, they are aware that it can be manipulated, and they are aware that it can make simple errors as well. So we have manipulated ChatGPT in order to say, in order to make it say that the Earth might be more elongated than we previously thought, and possibly even banana-shaped structure. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed that follow-up to SciManDan's video. I keep calling him Dan as if it's the first name. It is shorthand. We all know it's called SciManDan. Anyway, I'll see you next time. Goodbye.